Welcome to another week of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate competition. You're watching Just Punjabi and I'm your host Ashmita. We are at the end of the quarterfinals. Tonight we watch the final debate 8 of this round. 8 contestants have come up on this stage and made their points. It has been a long 8-week journey. You followed along watching every episode, voting, watching our contestants argue not just one side of the resolution, but the opposing side as well. And these young contestants have constructed some phenomenal arguments. I want to remind our viewers that this competition follows the Lincoln-Douglas debate model, formerly. But the inspiration was Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who conducted many debates during his time with Hindu ascetics, also known as the Siddh Gosht. Guru Nanak Dev Ji at the time reminded his opponents, do not get upset, just answer the question. And our contestants have been doing just that, using logic and reason to lay out their arguments. They've made excellent use of the various lessons handed to them by the debate coaches and organizers throughout this journey. Once again, we are about to kick off the last debate of the quarterfinals of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate competition. So let's get started. Let's welcome our contestants back on the stage.
So this is your second round of debate. How do you feel going into this?
I feel really good. I'm going up against a new person, so get to see a new perspective, and yeah.
So what do you think about having to argue the opposite side this time?
I get to see a new perspective of this whole case, but I have some really good arguments for this, and I'll get to put all my work into that, so.
Perfect. Good luck.
Thank you.
So this is your second round of debate. How do you feel going into this?
I feel pretty confident about round 2. It's a new perspective, so I think things will be a little bit different this round.
Are there any big changes that you made going into this round?
Not really. I just think that I know how to, pause and take deep breaths between speeches.
Sounds good. Good luck.
So let's kick off debate 8 of the quarterfinals. And first, I'd like to welcome on stage Bakshish Jimenez. Welcome back, Bakshish. Good to have you. Of course, I'd love to welcome back Jasjot Singh. Welcome. Candidates, please shake hands. So once again, Bakshish and Jasjot are on the stage with us. They have been here before, but now they're arguing from the other side. Bakshish, do you feel that you have any advantage coming on and arguing the other side, or do you feel it's more difficult to now go against your own earlier argument?
I feel like there are some difficulties, but I feel like I prepared well for this debate, so I'll do pretty good.
Wonderful. And how do you feel, Jasjot? Of course, you're more comfortable now for sure, but you're taking a completely different tact here. So what's going on in your head?
I think it's a completely new perspective that I'm taking, so it's definitely going to be interesting.
Wonderful. Interesting is the understatement of the day. The debates that we've seen so far in this journey and the skill with which these contestants have presented their points shows that interesting is just the tip of the iceberg. So let's kick off once again the final debate of the quarterfinals of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate show. Let's kick off debate 8.
But if you're ready, we'll go ahead and start the time now.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I affirm the resolution that a Sikh Gurdwara is a place of worship. My framework for this case is religious sanctity, which holds that the primary function of a Gurdwara is to provide a sacred space for devotion, prayer, and spiritual connection with Vaheguru. My first contention states that the primary purpose of a Gurdwara is worship. A Gurdwara is fundamentally a sacred space dedicated to worship, where Sikhs gather to recite prayers, participate in kirtan, and reflect on the Guru Granth Sahib's teachings. While Gurdwaras may provide additional services, their core purpose remains spiritual connection with Vaheguru. Sikhism emphasizes that true fulfillment comes from meditation, devotion, and remembering God's name, rather than engaging in worldly affairs. The Guru Granth Sahib emphasizes this spiritual focus, stating, meditate on his name, worship and adore him, and you shall be at peace forever. Shri Guru Granth Sahib, Ang 33. This quote underscores the idea that peace and fulfillment come through spiritual connection, not worldly engagements. A Gurdwara provides Sikhs with an environment that facilitates this divine connection, ensuring that worship remains central to Sikh life. Furthermore, Guru Nanak Dev Ji states, "Without the name, there is no peace. Everything else is just an illusion." Shri Guru Granth Sahib, Ang 1323. This reinforces the idea that worship and devotion to Vaheguru are the highest priorities in Sikh life. Expanding the Gurdwara's role too far beyond its sacred function could shift focus away from prayer, Nam Simran, and divine connection, weakening Sikh religious discipline. By preserving the spiritual sanctity of Gurdwaras, Sikhs ensure that these spaces remain dedicated to worship, rather than turning into secular community centers where worldly affairs might take precedence over devotion. My second contention states that secular activities can distract from religious devotion. While Sikhism encourages community service, allowing too many secular activities within Gurdwaras can distract from spiritual discipline. Sikh teachings emphasize that Nam Simran and Gurbani are essential for achieving oneness with Vaheguru. However, if political meetings, social events, or excessive educational activities take priority, Sikhs may gradually lose focus on their spiritual obligations. Guru Arjan Dev Ji warns against the distractions of worldly affairs, stating, "Do not be entangled in the affairs of the world. Focus on the name of the Lord." Shri Guru Granth Sahib, Ang 9. This highlights the need to prioritize special devotion over worldly distractions. While Sikhism encourages engagement in social causes, these activities can take place outside the Gurdwara, ensuring that worship remains the primary focus within its sacred walls. Additionally, Guru Nanak Dev Ji reminds Sikhs of the importance of maintaining spiritual discipline. One who forgets the name of the Lord, even if they engage in countless worldly affairs, gains nothing. Shri Guru Granth Sahib, Ang 218. This reinforces the idea that overemphasizing secular activities within Gurdwaras can weaken spiritual commitment. If the Gurdwara becomes a place for debates, activism, or social initiatives, it risks losing its primary purpose as a space for prayer and reflection. To maintain religious sanctity, Sikhs must ensure that Gurdwaras remain focused on their spiritual mission. My final contention states that expanding the role of Gurdwaras risks diluting religious identity. Sikhism has a distinct religious identity centered on devotion, discipline, and the teachings of the Guru Granth Sahib. If Gurdwaras begin to function primarily as political, educational, or social institutions, they risk losing their sacred nature over time. The primary role of Gurdwara must remain spiritual, ensuring that Sikh traditions and teachings are passed down without dilution or external influence. Guru Granth Sahib teaches that the path to God is through devotion, not worldly engagements, stating, "The temple and the mosque are the same, as are the Hindu and Muslim ways, but the path to God is through devotion." This reinforces the idea that a place of worship should remain a place of worship, rather than transforming into a multi-purpose venue. Throughout history, religious spaces that became too entangled in worldly affairs often lost their spiritual essence, leading to weakened religious discipline among followers.
Thank you so much. So after that, we will move to the negatives speech, if you're ready.
May I have 2 minutes prep time? Thank you.
Your time starts now.
All right. You ready? All right. Your time starts now.
I negate the resolution that a Gurdwara is a place of worship for Sikhs. The value for my round is Sikhi, emphasizing the holistic teachings of the Guru Granth and the role of a Gurdwara as a place that encourages spiritual, communal, and intellectual growth. My value criterion is community. This evaluation is based on how the Gurdwara functions as a communal space, promoting unity, shared values, and collective progress within the Sikh community. Contention 1. The Gurdwara belongs to the community and thus serves the role as a place for the Sikh community to gather as Sarbat Khalsa for Seva, Langar, and more. The Gurdwara is not merely a place of worship, but a space deeply rooted in the collective responsibility and unity of community. Historically, the Gurdwara has been a communal hub where Sangat comes together for service and to partake in Langar. These practices are integral to Sikh teachings, demonstrating how Gurdwaras include both spiritual and social well-being. Sikhs actively contribute to the Gurdwara's upkeep and activities, ensuring it is a living, breathing institution of service and unity. The Rayat Maryada and the practice of Sarbat Khalsa, where decisions are made collectively inside the Gurdwara, emphasize the role of the Gurdwara as a space for communal growth. For example, Gurdwaras around the world such as Gurdwara Sahib Sukhsagar, or a Gurdwara highlighted by a Forbes article by Manswini Kaushik, found that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Gurdwara Rakabganj in Delhi opened a 400-bed care center and provided meals and supplies during India's 2021 coronavirus surge, showing how Gurdwaras serve as lifelines for their communities, translating Sikh values into real-world action. Such acts of seva emphasize the interconnectedness of worship and community, where the Gurdwara serves both as a space of spiritual practice and as a place that strengthens communal ties. Contention 2. In today's world, Gurdwaras offer educational resources and support for youth. In addition to being a center for service, the Gurdwara is also a hub of education, ensuring that Sikh values, language, and traditions are passed on to future generations. The word Sikh literally means student or to learn, while Guru means teacher, making the Gurdwara a place where the teacher imparts wisdom to the student, providing spiritual and intellectual guidance to the Sikh community. Through Gurbani, Kirtan, and Gurmukhi lessons, the Gurdwara equips Sikhs with the knowledge needed to engage with their faith. Guru Arjan Dev Ji saying, "Jis di gyan nahi o Sikh nahi," Guru Granth Sahib Ji 1412, highlights the inseparable link between learning and spiritual growth happening in the Gurdwara. Modern Gurdwaras expand on this mission by offering programs in Kirtan, Tabla, and Gurbani, ensuring that Sikhs remain connected to their spiritual roots and to prevent identity erosion. Projects funded by Nishkam TV and Vaad Vivaad are projects that have been based between communities established by Gurdwaras, and they engage youth in learning Sikh values through media, preserving and passing on traditions. Additionally, the Gurdwara provides spaces for youth to explore both spiritual and intellectual growth, reinforcing its role as a community-centered space for lifelong learning. Without Gurdwaras, the Sikh identity would be largely at risk of fading away, and educational resources for youth of all wealth classes would significantly decrease. My opponent falsely claims a Gurdwara Sahib is primarily a place of worship. This is deeply flawed, as worship only occurs in the Diwan Hall of a Gurdwara, one of the many rooms in a standard Gurdwara Sahib. The Langar Hall, classrooms, and community spaces are just some of the rooms provided by standard Gurdwaras around the world, but they serve entirely different functions. They provide food, education, and a place to make decisions. To claim the Gurdwara Sahib is only a place of worship is just like saying a school is only for lunch, because a cafeteria is housed there. My opponent also ignores that the Gurdwara Sahib is a place for learning and inspiration, not just a place where Sikhs come to pray. Gurdwaras around the world teach Gurmukhi, Gurbani, history, and Punjabi, all of which are just as integral to Sikhi as worship is. Also, without education that Gurdwaras provide, how would children that grow up in the United States with English as their first language be able to read the Guru Granth Sahib and therefore be able to worship? Gurdwaras also serve people in need, act as relief centers, and have historically been a place for consensus, the traditional Sikh way of decision-making. If Gurdwaras were just for worship, why do they feed thousands of meals daily, educate young Singhs and Kaurs, and function as meeting places? Thank you.
Next, we'd have the pro rebuttal, unless you want to take some prep time.
May I take three minutes, please?
Sure.
Time starts now.
So that's 3 minutes on the clock for pro. Your time starts now.
My opponent states that Langar and the Sarbat Khalsa represents unity and well-being of the Sikhs. But, however, it could also be argued that this also represents worship in a community. This also represents worship in the Langar Hall. He also states that a Gurdwara provides foreign aid, but this service could also be argued that it could be used outside of the Gurdwara. Shelter, food, and other services could be provided in a different building, such as education as well. He also states that education and learning is inside of the Gurdwara and relates to the Gurdwara, but it can be argued that education can be taught outside of Gurdwara and can be used in a different manner. Like, for example, I am a TA and many students aren't exactly focused on what we are learning. So it's better to take that learning into a different region instead of having it focused where we primarily do our worship with the Guru Granth Sahib. So it's also better to incorporate that. And he also has a hard time connecting back the fact that with foreign aid, he doesn't connect it back to his framework of holistic teaching and how it helps influence growth. So he's unable to state that. So I believe there's many different ways we can understand how education and being in a community is actually tied to worship, and how worship isn't just sitting in front of the Guru Granth Sahib. It's more also there's different ways of seeing worship as talking with others, learning, and many different aspects of this. And that concludes my rebuttal.
All right, so then we'll also have 3 minutes for the prose crystallization. Are you ready, or do you want to take some time?
Can I have 3 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you.
Your time starts now. That's 3 minutes used.
All right, so 3 minutes for pro. Your time starts now.
I believe that I've won this case by demonstrating that the primary purpose of Gurdwara is to provide a sacred space for worship and spiritual connection with Vaheguru, aligning with the framework of religious sanctity. My first contention emphasized that Gurdwaras must prioritize prayer, kirtan, and spiritual devotion, allowing Sikhs to connect with Vaheguru. My second contention argued that secular activities within Gurdwaras would distract from spiritual practices like Nam Simran and Gurbani. My third contention explained that introducing political or social functions could dilute the religious identity of the Gurdwara, by weakening its sanctity. Each of these points emphasized that preserving the spiritual focus of a Gurdwara is essential to maintaining its sanctity. By proving that Gurdwara should remain dedicated to spiritual practices, I successfully affirmed the resolution. Along with this, I was able to show how my opponent's case of education and Sarbat Khalsa truly holds a connection with worship and its many sides. Worship is very diverse in Sikhi, and my opponent is unable to identify this, along with connecting it deeply to his value. Thank you for.
All right, so we'll have our last speech. Are you ready, or do you want to take some prep time?
How much time do I have left?
You have 4 minutes left.
Could I get all 4, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Your time starts now.
So for the final speech, your time begins now.
Now I will crystallize the key points I've decisively won and showcase how they systemically beat my opponent's case. I will demonstrate why these points are not just important, but absolutely critical in upholding my value criterion and proving the supremacy of my case over theirs. The first point I've unequivocally won is that the Gurdwara Sahib is a center for community and seva, not just worship. My opponent clings to the idea that a Gurdwara's main role is worship because of historical context. This is baseless because the Rehat, Maryada, and Sikh history prove that seva, langar, and Sarbat Khalsa all take place in Gurdwaras and are pillars of life. If worship were the primary function of Gurdwaras, why would many Gurdwaras dedicate their resources to feeding and serving community? Worship may be part of the Gurdwara's role, but it does not define it completely. Furthermore, the Gurdwara ensures Sikhi survives. Without Gurdwara, Sikhs would be at risk of identity erosion. My opponent's arguments leave out the fact that the Gurdwara Sahib plays a role in teaching Sikh history and languages to those worldwide. The word Sikh, again, literally means student, or teaching, or learning, and Guru means teacher, meaning Gurdwara is a place for learning. This exposes the fundamental weakness in their case and shows why their entire strategy is built on a house of cards. Lastly, I've shown that Sikhism values action over just rituals, and Gurdwaras are living institutions for seva, education, and unity. In fact, Nishkam TV was founded by Gurdwara Sangat, and its headquarters is located inside of a Gurdwara. One of the many examples showing that a Gurdwara facilitates much more than just solely worship. Therefore, every argument I've presented has systemically dismantled my opponent's case and has reinforced why I am the clear winner of this round. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And that was the end.
All right, now that you finished both rounds, how do you feel coming out of that?
I feel really good. I feel like I did better this round, so hopefully I win.
What was the most challenging part today?
I feel like, doing this for the first time, since it's my first time on live TV, just trying to share out my ideas, but I feel like over the time I learned how to state what I need to say.
All right, sounds good. Good luck. Thank you. So now that you finished both rounds of debate, how do you feel?
I feel great. I think my last round just went way better than my first round, so feeling pretty confident.
So if unfortunately that was your last round, what did you take out from all of this?
I think I still believe in myself, and I still made it to quarterfinals, which is still a big accomplishment. So I think that's pretty much it.
Do you think you won?
I'm not too sure about that.
All right, good luck.
Okay, so our last debate, we've heard so many different arguments. I think even despite hearing so many arguments and variations of cases, there still were some kind of novel arguments or even ways of rebuttals. So what kind of things did you hear that were novel, that stuck out to you, even after seeing this kind of case and doing it multiple times? And do any of those factor in all of your all's decisions?
So I'll start off with by saying that both sides, they had relatively good arguments to start off with. I'll just point out a few things that caught my eye. With the pro side, it was specifically secular activities. I think, and then I guess the con. I guess one thing that really caught me, really shook me a little bit was the place of education and wisdom. And then he brought up I think he was the first one that brought up the gurus used it as a place of worship, or not a place of worship, sorry, a place of education. I really haven't actually heard that literally all day, which is people have been saying education, but they never said the gurus taught education, actual maths and subjects and stuff like that. So yeah.
I think in a similar way, in the pro, I was actually going to say the diluting of the teachings argument was really interesting to me, because he was as his last contention, if too many things are happening, you're diluting the identity or the strength of the Sikh identity. Uh-huh. But then I also was really impressed by an argument that I haven't heard all day, which was this idea of, we've heard references to it, but he really hammered home this idea that Gurdwara is actually the reason that the Sikh faith is able to stay alive, especially within North America, and that you continue using it not just as a place where Gurbani and Kirtan happen, but as a place where you're learning about the future of Sikhi. So I thought that was really interesting. And then his framework of community. I think the pro also had, again, like we were just saying, really strong arguments. But in the beginning of their speech, they did define worship in a very limited way to meditation, devotion, and meditation, devotion, and to constantly adore the Guru. So I thought that was an interesting thing to keep in consideration as his definition of worship.
I think just going off your last point, that kind of puts the burden on the negative case. Yeah, to help, really define what worship is, or especially negate that in a way that it encompasses more than just devotion, kirtan, and Gurbani. So yeah. I think that's going to be very important for us to see if the negative was able to make that case of really does worship expand beyond the three things mentioned by the affirmative case,
or does the Gurdwara expand beyond this? Yeah.
Yeah. I think one point on the affirmative case is contention 3, which I think is something it's fairly new concept that we haven't really heard a lot, is like bringing additional things in like politics or external activities outside of the Sikh community can help distract and decrease engagement here. So make the Sangha lose focus of what's important in the religious aspect in terms of like and referencing historical events that might have done that without like explicitly saying which historical events that they were referring to. So I would have loved to see like a card on this in terms of at least explaining which specific historical events. Like I'm sure we can all think of many, but it would be nice for like to provide a specific example instead of like blanketing that.
Yeah, and then the pro actually brought up a while very limited, I guess you could say, clashing and limited rebuttal. They did bring up a rebuttal of like it was a little bit hard to understand in the beginning, where like they said like like other activities can happen outside of the Gurdwara. What I think he was trying to say, which he kind of cleared up a little bit afterwards, was like saying like I think he was referring how like at a school, like like schools that we go to, right? Like they have cafeterias, but like they're not defined as a cafeteria because there's different parts to it.
Yeah.
I think what he was trying to do was trying to create like juxtapose that to a to a Gurdwara, where like just because they have a langar hall, just because they have a kitchen, doesn't necessarily mean that is part of it. That like basically saying that the main point is for worship. Other than that, I really didn't see much rebuttaling. It was more of like just this repetition of, I guess you could say, of like place of worship. Everything is done through worship, kind of very vague though. But like the pro, like he said that the Sarbat Khalsa is worship, which I was so confused. I was like, he didn't elaborate on that or anything. So
the Khan was the original.
Yes.
And he was right. He was saying that Sarbat Khalsa is something that happens within Gurdwaras, but is not explicitly worship because it's making decisions on behalf of the Sikh community. So I actually thought that was compelling because I haven't heard that argument much today. Another thing I was going to say, similar to what you were saying, is that another thing that I think the Khan did well, and I wish he expanded and emphasized it more because it was a good point, but he said that the reason why the education happening at a Gurdwara is unique is because it helps you worship. Like the education at the Gurdwara leads to understanding of Guru Granth Sahib Ji and therefore allows you to worship. So I thought that was really smart because he was picking up on a point of like, this is not an education that you get outside of the Gurdwara. It's something that helps you worship. And then the other point I was going to say on the pro side, well, I was really convinced by a lot of those arguments that he initially gave us in the beginning. I think there was a bit of contradiction based off of what you were saying, because he did say in his contention that secular activities basically detract. And when he was talking about those secular activities, he was talking about things like, I don't know if exactly he cited longer, but I think there were implications that like other things that were not what he said, meditation, devotion, were secular, which is why then in his rebuttal speech, when he was saying, well, worship can be multifaceted, in referring to Sarbat Khalsa and Langar, I was like, well, if we call those secular activities, we can't then call those worship.
Yeah, I definitely think based on this, the negative definitely had a better rebuttal strategy and points versus the affirmative case. I think the negative, like you said, there's 2 points in terms of like Gurdwaras have other like rooms devoted to different activities, but that doesn't define what they are. And then also teaching Gurbani in the Gurdwara can help, do better worship. So those are 2 points that really on the rebuttal stand out, versus the affirmative rebuttal is kind of really just skirting around the topic of like there's different forms of worship, but like the worship that I mentioned is still important, and all of these other activities can happen outside. That to me seems like a weaker case given all of the points of that the negative was able to make in terms of, well, like teaching can't happen outside because teaching can enable worship in the Gurdwara space.
I'm also, similar to that, really impressed actually that I haven't heard the Nishgam TV point, which I thought was actually really unique because he was saying specifically, like, that's actually something that was started by the Sanghat, and its headquarters are in the Gurdwara.
Yeah.
So that's not something that could necessarily happen outside of the Gurdwara because the headquarters are based there. And that's where the Sanghat is. So that's where the Nishkam TV is based, as like a very concrete example. Because I think like even outside of debate itself, rhetorically, when you're trying to convince an audience, doing it through something that people know and is accessible is always a good strategy to use. And so I just thought that was a great point that he made, because he was saying, well, like if we're thinking about the primary focus, why would Gurdwaras devote resources to things, community initiatives like Nishkam TV? If it was only a place of worship, why would there be, things that we're dedicating specifically to seva, to langar, to community action? So I was impressed by that point, because I thought it was very unique and very accessible.
And I also think like the negatives, like whole aspect of identity through preserving like Sikh youth and educating them through the Gurdwara system, like it's definitely something that still flows. I know we talked about that earlier in the round, but it sounds like we're kind of reaching a consensus. And then speaker points. Well, yeah. What do you think?
Okay. I think based on honestly how we've judged the rest of the points, I would probably give actually Pro around a 7, just comparatively to the rest of the day. And I would give Con 8.
Yep. I think I agree with you. The pro and the affirmative case would get a 7 from my side, and then the negative would get an 8. Yeah, okay.
So another argument that's often used in a way that's kind of leads to being a logical fallacy is the argument from nature. You've probably heard this, in a lot of different contexts. You'll hear it in a lot of Sikh contexts, in a lot of maybe health contexts. It's when people say, well, in nature it's like this, or this is the natural way to do it. While it may be true sometimes to bolster arguments from science, from the way nature is done, you should always try to examine that very carefully. Don't just take someone's word for how things are done in nature. For one, not everything in nature just makes for, how things are meant to be in a debate, depending on the debate we're doing. Secondly, someone's definition of nature can depend a lot based on their cultural context. Someone in the West might have a very different context of what's natural to them than someone from the East, someone from Punjab. So someone from the 1900s is going to have a very different idea of what's natural to them and what's just part of nature than someone from our modern day. So keep that in mind when making arguments, and try to avoid this fallacy in your day-to-day life as well as in your arguments.
Welcome back once again. We are officially at the end of the quarterfinals of this competition. With debate 8 wrapped up, we have concluded this round of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate show. This program is being filmed at the Just TV studios in New York City, and I'm happy to share once again that a live audience is with us for this very special production. As always, I have some results to share with you. Before we get to the final judge's decision for the quarterfinals round, I will share your favorites for this week. The audience favorites for debate 8 of the Vaad Vivaad competition is Jasjot Singh. Congratulations, Jasjot. The audience thought you conducted an amazing debate this week. What do you have to say to them?
Thank you so much for your support, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed my debate.
All right. Without any further ado, to close out the quarterfinals of this competition, and before we announce the final 4 contestants who will be advancing to the semifinals, the judges have spoken. I have their decision right here with me. The winner of debate 8 of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad competition is Jasjot Singh. Congratulations. 8 8 contestants, 16 debates, but only 4 will advance to the semi-finals of the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate competition. All of the contestants are here with me on stage. And first of all, can we get a huge round of applause for these amazing contestants? The first ever Sikh youth debate competition televised live on Just Punjabi TV. You've been following along for many weeks now. And as we advance to the semi-finals, only 4 of these talented individuals will move forward. I have the results with me here. As you know, we've been following the Lincoln Douglas debate format. They are not just evaluated on their debate performance by our judges, but speaker points, which come in handy in the case of an extremely close race or a tiebreak. So today, I will be sharing with you which of these talented individuals will be moving on to the semi-finals. Moving on as a double winner will be Bhavit Singh, Sumer Singh, Jasjot Singh, and in the debate between Ruhani and Samir, even though Samir was the winner of the debate, Ruhani was able to move forward by win of speaker points. So Ruhani will be advancing to the semi-finals. Once again, audience watching at home, thank you so much for your participation and for choosing your audience favorites. On this stage, the winners that are moving forward to the next round were determined by our judges following a very strict criteria, but truly, every single one of these individuals is winners, and we hope to see your kids in the next Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate competition. Of course, there will be a season 2, but stay tuned for the semi-finals. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate show. This was the last debate of the quarterfinals. Next week, join us as we kick off the semi-finals with our final 4. Until then, you can write to us at info@justbroadcasting or ashmita@justbroadcasting. Of course, follow along on our social media pages. This is Ashmita signing off.
I'm Upkaran Singh Pogal, a tech professional and real estate investor. Like many people, I used to think the only way to build wealth was by working hard at a 9-to-5 job. That all changed when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The book opened my eyes to the power of investing, how real estate can create passive income and long-term wealth rather than just relying on a paycheck. I realized that building a portfolio of properties was a way to create financial freedom and gain control over my future. So, I dove into real estate investing, and let me tell you, it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Investing is key to securing financial independence. Whether you're looking for side income or a long-term strategy, real estate can make it happen. I'm passionate about giving back and teaching others how to get started on their investing journey too. So, if you're interested in learning more about real estate investing, feel free to follow me on Instagram and shoot me a DM.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This is Harman Singh, Executive Director of the Sikh Coalition. For more than 20 years, the Sikh Coalition has worked to reduce hate, violence, and discrimination experienced by the Sikh community. Nationwide, we work in the court system, in policy, in education, community development, and media and communications to raise the Sikh profile and build a new future for Sikh youth. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.